consent is not part of the definition of torture. We don't ask torture survivors whether they consented to the beating, whether they consented to be waterboarded, whether they consented to be strung up from their legs or from their arm. We don't ask that question because it's irrelevant, because they are in a circumstance of coercion, of an unequal and asymmetric power relationship. So when we think about sexual torture within the context of torture, that issue of consent for me also should not be relevant. And that's why the full spectrum of what has happened to them becomes so important, because it's odd, isn't it, to say, oh, we won't ask you about whether you consented to being abducted and held in a basement, etc. But we're going to ask you, what about the sex that happened within that context? You see, it's kind of perverse. So I think, I think that'll take some getting used to for investigators and others to take that on board. We already have a judgment or two by the international tribunals and courts to say that the coercive environment implies that there's no consent, yet they're still asking questions of consent because they're prosecuting under the rape crime or the sexual assault crime. So I think there's still some work to do to see how those things fit together. But I think that should be freeing for investigators and prosecutors, as well as for the victims and survivors themselves.